Guys, can you hear me?
Yes, doctor, we can
Yes,
hear.
doctor, we hear you.
Okay, so we're going to finish, the theoretical part this week. So the neo-institutionalism, it's kind of repackaging of what we have already said. So we are not gonna you're not going to learn something or new theories. It's kind of new formulation of what we have said, but assigning some kind of autonomous power or causal power to institutions in order to exert, in order to affect individuals' behavior and individuals' actions as well, and social behavior as well. So let me admit these people. Okay, when we talk about neo-institutionalism, meaning or implicitly, or it goes like without saying that there existed some sort of old institutionalism. Can you guys remind me about what we have said about old institutionalism before the behavioral revolution?
Doctor, I
Yeah,
think إن هما كانوا more concentrated على الفورمال institutions بتوع ال government. ما كانش فيه مثلا definition زي ال power أو system أو الحاجات اللي زي دي كانوا
because the definition of politics was reducible to state institutions and state organization. So we focus mainly on
the legislative, executive, and things like that.
Yeah, the constitutional and the legal framework of the functionality or the operation of particular institutions like the executive branch or the legislative branch. And when it comes to the scope of coverage, what kind of formal institutions political scientists or comparativists they were interested in?
Doctor, could you repeat the question again, please?
Yeah, they focus mainly before the behavioral revolution. As we mentioned, the main emphasis was on formal institutions like constitutional setting and legal setting that organized the functionality or the operation of particular state organizations or state institutions, but in specific areas or in specific countries. So the focus was limited to... Sorry?
The formal institutions.
Where?
They focus on it.
In Western countries.
In Western countries.
Doctor, I think in Western and democratic nations.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was, that's why it was accused of being kind of Eurocentric or ethnocentric. They like the comparative politics as a field because these countries that they had like they were kind of capitalist developed countries and democratic ones. So they were like, they deserved kind of closer examination or closer investigation, and other countries that were colonized or were underdeveloped. So they were not kind of worthy of any close examination according to comparativist or comparative politics field before the behavioral revolution. So neo-institutionalism like came into being as like a theoretical tradition, or like as like way of thinking in comparative politics in 1980. Try to guess like what kind of take, behavioralist or how behavioralists actually approached, institutions after the behavioral revolution. So after the behavioral revolution, so they focused on individual behavior. Some other countries, they broadened the scope in order to integrate, third world countries or newly emerging states in sub-Saharan Africa and in the Middle East. So they broadened the scope or the themes comparativists would investigate. But try to guess their stand towards institutions, how they define institutions.
They emphasized more on the informal forms of institution.
Yeah, so we integrated other forms of or other aspects of institutions, not only state organizations or state institutions. So we also integrate, or we pay attention to informal institutions, and in different areas or in different countries, not necessarily in Western countries. Okay.
Okay, doctor.
Okay, no, I'm still waiting for some guesses and thoughts. So let me help you. When we talk about like theoretical school, or like a new like theoretical tradition in comparative politics, meaning like rational choice, they focus on how like rationality or these kind of strategic calculations and utility maximization affect individuals' behavior. Like culture, how belief system, meaning, whatever, affect social and political phenomena. Like structuralism, how this kind of overall system of relationships and interdependence would affect like systemic transformation or social revolutions. So we focus mainly on like independent variable or independent variable and dependent variable. So theoretical school would offer you kind of independent variable that would help you understand the political outcome, which is your dependent variable, which is under investigation, right? So when we talk about new institutionalism as a new theoretical school or theoretical approach, so it goes like without saying, or by definition, that proponents or advocates of new institutionalism would assign independent power to institutions, or the formal and informal rules and norms, in order to affect or to account for political and social outcome. Okay, so behavioralists regarded like institutions as only kind of aggregation of individual behavior. So it's an outcome of individual behavior or underlying structure, and they didn't assign any kind of independent causal power, or they didn't perceive institutions that they have kind of autonomous effect on political outcome and social outcome. So that's why the advocates of the neo-institutionalism as a trend in comparative politics, they stressed or emphasized the autonomous effect of institutions. So institutions per se have agency. It would affect the institution per se would affect the particular outcome. Like individual, it would shape expectations and of individuals, and it would shape as well their behavior and action. And as well, it would affect the social dynamics and the social processes and even economic transactions. So like, if you believe in this new institutionalism, or like people who advocated for scholars who advocate for new institutionalism, so they stressed or focused on two main or interrelated issues. The first one, how institutions affect and shape expectations and behavior, individuals' behavior, and processes whereby the institutions actually come into being and would change or persist over time or change over time. So they investigated this kind of relational they approached this in kind of from relational perspective. So institutions in relation to individuals or the behavior and action, and the emergence of how institutions actually originate, or how they actually emerge and come into being, and why they persist over time, and whether or not they can institutions can change. New institutionalism as a label, it's not like a coherent theoretical traditions. So at least, and this is what we are going to cover, at least we speak of three main traditions. The first one, rational choice institutionalism, which like corresponds to the rational choice theory we discussed, and sociological institutionalism, and in some readings they would say normative institutionalism. There is kind of a slight difference between normative and sociological. I'm going to elaborate on this shortly. And this corresponds to cultural approach, or culturalism as like a traditional theoretical school, or constructivism in comparative politics. And then historical institutionalism, it kind of combines both like structuralism and some sort of agency or individual choices, and how the interaction between like this structural framework or structural properties alongside individual choices would account for particular political and social outcome. So we are going to cover like three main like traditions in new institutionalism, and it's kind of repackaging of what we have said with regard to rational choice, culturalism, and structuralism. So far, it's okay?
Okay, doctor.
Yes, doctor.
Okay. So if I ask you what institutions are, formal or informal? Sorry?
I think institutions are set of regularities or set of instructions which are obeyed by a collective or group of people. If it's formal, it's related to that they must obey it. It's informal, it doesn't must to obey it.
It's not what?
If it's not formal, it's not a must to obey it.
Yeah, so people don't need, if it's not formal, if it's informal, so people don't need to obey these institutions or comply with these regulations and rules.
Yes.
Okay, any more thoughts?
Doctor,
Guys, remind me toward the end of the session to talk about your second reaction paper, okay?
doctor,
Yeah.
I'm sorry بس أنا في حاجة مش فاهماها، مش مجمعة يعني.
Hagar?
لا، رؤية.
Yeah.
أنا مش فاهمة، هو الانستتيوشنز دي مش المفروض اللي هي المؤسسات؟
Yeah.
طيب أنا سمعت يارا بتقول إن هي مجموعة من الحاجات اللي المفروض إن الناس بتobey لو هي.
Yeah, this is what we are trying, this is the definition we are elaborating on.
Yeah, طب what is the relation?
Because I know that it's kind of, you have like, you know, it's kind of, you use institutions and organizations interchangeably. And this is not true. Okay?
Yeah.
So if I ask you how you define institutions.
Organizations يعني اللي هي
Not necessarily.
Okay.
More thoughts?
I suppose institutions could, since they could be formal and informal, they could be set of like written or unwritten like values and norms.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we are, when we say institution, we refer to like certain set of rules, norms, routines that would shape people's behavior or discipline their actions. There is kind of a separation, like this kind of a fine line between normative and sociological. So normative institutionalism, they focus on these kind of norms and values and beliefs that would shape, people's behavior and people's actions. But sociological proponents of sociological institutionalism would account for this frame of meaning as well, like this kind of symbols, or the system of symbols and cognitive scripts and moral templates that would these are or they all affect your behavior or affect your decision or your choices. So for example, it's not only you internalize specific norms in society, like, patriarchy, if you remember the example I gave in week 2, I think, or week 1. So there is kind of internalization of norms, like, patriarchy and this kind of superiority of men, or subordination of women in a particular society. So it's not only like this kind of internalization of these norms and beliefs, but also these kind of cognitive processes or cognitive scripts that would define what people would imagine their social role in particular environment. So this kind of in these kind of settings or environments of patriarchy, so women wouldn't imagine any kind of empowering role, for example. So with these kind of cognitive processes, they cannot imagine particular social role in this society, or to be admitted, to political process or ministerial post, for example, in these kind of environments, or permitted with patriarchal culture. So that's why it's not only internalization of norms and beliefs, it's kind of this kind of cognitions and moral templates that would demarcate the line of what people should do, not only should do, but imagine, to do in a particular setting. So when we talk about rules, so it can be formal, like this kind of formula of checks and balances between different branches of the government. So we still have these kind of formal rules that organize the operations of different state organizations and state institutions, but also informal rules. So I have like some examples from Latin America, like in Ecuador, for example, they had some sort of informal rules to organize legislative coalitions, or to build legislative coalition. They called it ghost coalition. So the informal rule was that opposition would build implicitly coalition with the government in order to have like this kind of mutual deal, in order to pass, the government agenda. So they have like this kind of implicit coalition. So I would support your policy agenda in return for, or in exchange for some material benefits. But publicly, they vocalize opposition to the government, but inside the parliament, or inside the lower house, they would support the passage of the legislative agenda, or the promulgation of the laws initiated by the government. What kind of informal rules we can talk about as well, given FAPS as an institution. So you may have like these kind of formal rules about enrollment in particular courses or particular classes, but there are kind of informal rules or unwritten rules that would shape your expectations and behavior as students. Can anyone explain this in some detail or give me some examples?
Dr. Sorry, I'm really sorry for interrupting, but Marwa Hussein want to enter the session. Marwa Hussein.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Doctor,
Yeah.
I think the way the professors communicate with us or offer the syllabus is not written. It's informal.
Yeah. So perhaps they have like this kind of terms of quality assurance written, something written that they have to distribute, or they have to give students like course outlines. But informal, there is kind of implicit agreement that this is not a must. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so you got it. So basically, it's kind of a broader definition, so we can, like, under this rubric of neo-institutionalism, we can have like formal rules, informal rules, routines, norms, samples, frame of meaning, cognitive scripts, moral templates that would affect your or shape your expectations and behavior as a human being, and it would affect the dynamics of the social processes and economic practices and social practices as well. So it's not only like a neo-institutionalism advocates of or scholars that would believe in neo-institutionalism as an independent variable, that like institutions do not only affect political outcomes but also economic practices and social practices as well. So for example, in a context or environment that they don't have any kind of written rules in order to preserve property rights, so people would develop some sort of informal or unwritten rule that they would have economic transactions with people who really trust. If I trust you, so I can have like kind of economic exchanges with you, unlike other countries that they have like this kind of formal rules that would preserve property rights. So it will facilitate exchanges much more formally. So it affects not only social practices, but also economic practices and economic transactions and political outcomes as well. So institutions per se, they have agency that affect your dependent variable or the political and social and economic outcome. So before we distinguish between the three branches or the three traditions of neo-institutionalism, if I ask you, so if we have like to vote on your midterm exam, so you have like two options. The first one, we can delay the midterm exam, but with the comprehensive focus. So you have to cover like the whole 6 weeks, or we cannot delay the midterm exam, and then we can have like a specific focus on the first 2 weeks, for example. And I ask you guys to vote, to organize this between or among yourselves, and then you can get back to me with a specific preference or a specific choice. How would you go about this?
We will discuss with each other what will suitable us or what will suitable أو what يعني اللي هي أكتر هيفيد our requirements أو الحاجات اللي عندنا يعني إيه اللي
No,
هيناسبنا
I'm asking about the procedures, like step by step, how you're going to organize this. If I nominate like Farida, just to she will be the representative, that she will get back to me with a specific decision to organize, the voting process and to monitor and everything, and then to get back to me with either or option, like delay or not to delay.
اوكي، هو في الاول هنروح مثلا على واتساب جروب او حاجه، هبوست الانونسمنت بتاع حضرتك ان انا هقول مثلا دكتور شيماء مثلا طالبه كذا، فايه رايكم؟ او هبدا اشوف اراء كذا واراء كذا. طبعا مش هيبقى كله قال نفس الحاجه، هيبقى في ناس عايزه حاجه، ناس تانية عايزه حاجه تانية. ففي الاخر خالص لو هنوصل لتو اوبشنز هكرييت
try
a poll.
English, Farida, okay?
Okay, sorry. I will trying to create a poll or voting for two options, and the option that most of the people will choose, I will go to you and tell you what we had, what we arrived at, or what option we choose.
Okay, and if it's like 50-50, if there's a tie, for example, or like people would abstain, people like they didn't participate in the poll.
I think in this case the decision is for you.
No, you have to come to me with a specific decision.
We may try to convince them.
Okay. How?
Okay, I think that we'll list the advantages and disadvantages of each option and balance them. We see what is more advantages more, and then we will choose it.
Okay, but if people like didn't respond to you, or they had like totally different preferences, or they are indifferent to these options, so you didn't get, you know, the voting you need in order to get back to me in a timely manner, how would you organize this?
Doctor,
Yeah.
maybe we can choose a small group and we ask this group, and so we generalize the choice for all the people.
Okay, so perhaps you can divide it into like specific or subgroups, and each group may have like a representative, and then you can divide it into like 5 groups, and then like a representative of each group would get back to the first group with the decision, and you ended up having like from 6 to 7 like block votes, and you make your own calculations. So if there are like 4 against 3 with the delay option, so you can get back to me with this. This is our decision, like delay with comprehensive focus. Okay, so what did you do here is kind of creating some sort of rules about voting, and rules about how you are going to calculate, you know, the votes in order to make it much more efficient in a way or another, because it's very difficult to have like, or to work out like 70 or more than 70 votes. So you kind of divide, you have like group divisions, and with group divisions they have like you give like weighted votes or block votes for each group, and then they will get back to Farida as a representative of the class, and then she will get back to me with your decision, right?
يا دكتور بالظبط صح.
Okay, yeah, so you created kind of institutions or rules in order to what was the problem here?
That there's 50-50 in the 2 options. I can't really decide what the option, what the exact.
No. If people like abstain, if people like don't respond to your like request, you know, for voting. So what's the problem here with this number, like more than 70 individuals?
You can't guarantee that the decision you make is gonna satisfy them. So if you take a decision on your own, maybe later they'll disagree.
If people are actually indifferent, or they will, or if I don't ask for like a great majority, or like, you know, absolute majority, so people actually would free ride on each other, right? It's kind of okay, like 5 or 6 or 7 representatives, you know, would do the task, okay, instead of like, you know, voting, or instead of like exerting, you know, this kind of mental effort about, you know, calculating or working out, you know, the advantages and disadvantages of each option. As Farida mentioned, if you give them, if you try to convince them, they actually, okay, we are indifferent, we are not going to vote anyhow. So by creating, you know, this kind of small groups or kind of institutional rules, what did you do here?
we formed new rules or institutions
Mhm.
in
To do
order
what?
to come up with a choice, because I'm committed in front of you to come up with a choice.
You're not, forget about me. You're interacting with your colleagues, okay? So I'm outside of this frame right now. Because I left it up to you to make up your mind about the midterm exam, okay? So I'm okay either way. So focus
Okay,
on your,
the problem here is that we have no consensus on the choice.
okay?
So I have to convince them.
Okay, you have to convince them by offering some sort of information, as Farida mentioned, the advantages and disadvantages of each option, right? So by formulating, small groups, or by creating, these kind of institutional rules or norms, so you communicate better with your group, and then you solve, this kind of a collective action problem in a way or another. Okay, instead of people like relying on each other to vote or to make, this decision, so you actually communicate and you offer information to your small group, and then you have your kind of particular vote, and then get back to the group, the class representative, and then the class representative will get back to me with your consensus, or with your decision, collective decision. Okay, I'll get back to this example later. But if you have like another example, if the dean ask you to join a meeting next week in order to have like, a verbal feedback in front of like, or faculty members on a particular course, and this course is delivered by old professor. And if you guys really don't like the course, or don't like, the way the professor actually communicating with you, can you bluntly criticize this? It's not a written one, and you have like you have to mention your name, and you have to verbalize your criticism. Would you do that?
No, we can't.
Who's talking?
Yara.
Yeah, okay. Why?
Because I would fear the consequences of my my speaking.
Okay, so there is kind of a norm that if you're critical of someone in a powerful position, so you are not totally free to vocalize your like your criticism, or if you have like any kind of opposing opinion, right?
Yes.
Okay, so there is kind of a norm or a routine that would actually shape your behavior. So you are kind of following particular informal rules, or you internalized these kind of norms that would shape your behavior. So the first example, by creating these institutions to offer information, or to facilitate, or to handle the process much more efficiently, this is what rational choice would argue for. And we are going to explain this in some detail later. And with this kind of norm of not verbalizing, opposition, or not bluntly criticize someone in a powerful position or powerful people. So this is like sociological institutionalism that would define or demarcate the boundaries of what to do and what not to do. So you see like how institutions, or these kind of institutional rules, would shape your choices and would shape your behavior. And this is exactly what neo-institutionalists would actually be interested in investigating. But they actually they investigate two interrelated issues. The first one, what institutions do, how institutions shape your behavior or individual's behavior and social processes and economic processes, and how they come into being in the first place. And then they investigate why they persist over time or why they change. Rational choice, institutionalism. So what are the main propositions of, or the theoretical assumptions of rational choice we studied 3 weeks before? So the same departure point here, the same behavioral assumptions. So what are the main assumptions?
That people are rational and that they were trying to maximize their utility by doing strategic calculations, cost and benefits, to see the best option that they have.
Yeah. So basically acting rationally by making your own calculations about cost and benefits and how you maximize your utility. But for rational choice institutionalism, you create these institutions or rules in order to give you a solution to collective action problem. So by solving this, by creating these institutions and solving collective action problem, you reach this kind of Nash equilibrium. What's the equilibrium we talked about before? What does it mean? What equilibrium mean? What does it mean?
That there is no change in the current state.
In what?
In the current state or the status quo, there is no factors changing.
You're closer to this. So you reach a point at which no one has any kind of incentive to defect. So there is no kind of improvement in the situation. So this is like the best reply to each other. So we created these institutional rules in order to solve, this voting processes among us, in order to reach, this in order to come up with this concrete decision in a timely manner and get back to the professor in order to say like delay or not to delay your exam. So there is no so this kind of by actually creating these small groups or kind of subcommittees, let's say, you offer some sort of information to your group, so you minimized the transaction cost, so everyone knows the advantages and disadvantages of each option, and you offer by making this kind of voting rule or this block voting rule, so you offer some sort of enforcement mechanisms. So after reaching a decision and getting back to me, no one would say, what, I had a different opinion, because there is kind of an agreement amongst yourselves that this kind of collective decision is binding, and all of us have to abide, or we have to comply with this collective decision. So it offers some sort of enforcement mechanisms. No one would defect, and if someone actually decides to defect, he or she will be penalized by the entire group. So it emerged from in order to investigate or to examine the congressional behavior, the voting behavior in the United States. So according to the rational choice theory, or the main assumption of rational choice theory, if you have members would have different orders or different preferences or different preference orders. So this would actually preclude the passage of any rule or transformation of any bills into laws. So that's why this would be like inefficient process if you let everyone vote according to his or her preference order. So that's why according to rational choice institutionalism, to understand the efficiency and the stable majority in the Congress, and this that was actually it was emanated from the creation or the establishment of the committee system. With this committee system, these kind of committees inside the legislative branch with some sort of jurisdiction and rules would organize the voting behavior between different members, and would handle this much more efficiently. So instead of precluding or putting obstacles in front of laws or bills, these rules would guarantee the passage of or the transformation of bills into laws. So this enables, for example, what they called like log rolling. So if you vote, this kind of reciprocity between different legislators. If you vote on this bill this time, so I would support you next time in the passage of another bill. So there is kind of particular committee rules and jurisdiction that would facilitate the voting behavior and created, this kind of a stable majority inside the legislature. So according to rational choice institutionalists, the institutions, generally speaking, are human construction. So they created it deliberately in order to serve a purpose. But still, it doesn't shape your preferences. Your preferences are exogenous. So the institutions don't shape your preferences. Your preferences are somehow like exogenous to the institutional rules. But you actually decided to create it, to establish or to construct these institutions or to abide by these rules because it would maximize your utility and would actually magnify your benefits. You made your own calculations and you decided to create, these institutions in order to maximize your benefits or your utility. Any questions so far? So they apply this to institution, to this kind of domain, or to yield insights in the creation or the establishment of particular institutions in order to solve the collective action problem, or to offer information about people's behaviors or other behaviors that would help you as well to make your own choices or to make your own decisions regarding something. So by creating these institutions or rules, so you have like you can expect people's behavior. So there is no kind of uncertainty here regarding people's behavior because all of them would comply with these rules. And you have like information that would help you in your strategic interaction with other actors. Because if you have like this kind of institutions that would preserve property rights, so you know that these people or people that you have like kind of economic transaction or you have any kind of economic deal or financial deal with will never breach these rules, otherwise they will get penalized if they defect. Okay?
Okay, doctor.
Okay. Sociological institutionalism. So they would perceive institutions as not necessarily as outcomes of strategic calculations of human being. So they actually, they don't have a fully crystallized idea about why institutions actually came into being. So what the main assumption here, or the departure point here, that you as human being or individuals, they actually behave, or they are embedded into these social networks and different worldviews, different value system, different norms, and different frames of meanings that would demarcate the boundaries of their actions and behavior, but like not necessarily you found yourself, in this kind of context or in this kind of macro environment of rules and norms and beliefs, and you have to kind of abide by these rules because these rules would define what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. So you have to abide by. So you cannot not only out of fear of being penalized or punished if you criticize, you know, an old professor verbally and publicly. But also there is kind of norm that you have to respect, you know, all people, and this is kind of inappropriate to criticize or to have kind of disagreement with someone on with all the professor on a particular issue. So you are embedded in these kind of belief systems and values and norms that would actually constraints or impose constraints on your actions or on your behavior. But it's not only, as I mentioned, it's not only norms, but it has something with the cognitive turn. Sociologists actually added, you know, this kind of cognitive dimension to sociological institutionalism, because it doesn't shape you like these kind of symbols and meanings don't shape only your preferences or your behavior, but they all have kind of impact or effect on your identity and your self-image, what you can do and what you can imagine actually to do in a particular context or environment, and what you cannot do, like your imaginative capacity here, what's going on inside your head. Because of these kind of certain meanings, certain like moral templates, certain like scripts, cognitive scripts that would facilitate or preclude certain image or certain identity, and thereby your behavior or your action. So for them, institutions are not necessarily or representative of any kind of efficient option. So some sort of inefficient institutions may persist over time, or you may still abide by these rules despite the fact that these rules are inefficient. So you may better off if you criticize, you know, this professor verbally, and to have like a different professor, or to actually to enroll yourself in a different class. So you might that was like would have been like much more efficient than the option or the choice of not criticizing verbally. Okay, so this kind of so this is this is the opposite. This is on the opposite side. These are like the two extremes, like rational choice institutionalism as rational choice theory, and culturalism or constructivism in comparative politics, and here sociological institutionalism as well. So it's not only about your strategic calculations. So this kind of logic of appropriateness. So it actually these norms and values and beliefs and this kind of self-image or cognitive scripts would offer you kind of simplifying device in order to tell you what's appropriate and what's inappropriate, and what to do and what not to do, and not necessarily efficient, but without denying the fact that it's kind of rational action as well. So it's not about your irrationality or your mental capacity or incapacity to make these calculations or the cost benefit analysis, but you're embedded in these kind of rules and beliefs that would actually constrain your behavior, or would consider your like the rational behavior kind of inappropriate behavior. So that's why it might be your own choice to abide by these rules in order to avoid any kind of negative consequences or potential punishments that would come out of this behavior. Another example from political science. So they actually export this from the field of the organizational culture and bureaucratic rules as well. So if these institutions or like bureaucratic agencies, they have this kind of deep entrenched culture or beliefs and values of like respecting, you know, of this strict hierarchical system, and this kind of respect to people that they hold top positions, in particular organizations or institutions. So you design your training programs in order to instill the same or perpetuate, the same values and same norms and same identities, and with the allocation of resources as well. So if you have like certain rules regarding the allocation of financial resources, but if there is kind of informal or unwritten rules saying that this department, like the communication department in a particular organization, should have like more financial resources or more economic resources. It's not written, but so the distribution of resources shouldn't be shouldn't be on egalitarian basis, because you have to allocate more resources for this department, because this department is responsible for or in charge of propagating marketing for your organization or for your agency. So you have to abide by these unwritten rules or these values and norms that would affect the allocation of resources or the designing of the training programs. So it's not like purposeful or like intentional human construction. It's kind of finding yourself embedded into these social networks and with certain system of symbols, beliefs, identities, and values, and it would actually affect your worldviews and your social practices and social interactions. Okay.
Okay, doctor.
Okay. Yeah. So if institutions, if you guys intentionally decided this is the most efficient way to go about something, and these are the institutions we created in order to have this equilibrium, or in order to solve this collective action problem, and to offer us some informational device, and to punish the factors, or to offer some sort of enforcement mechanisms. So why these institutions would persist over time, and when exactly these institutions would change or come about? So how can I explain the persistence of these institutions from rational choice institutionalist perspective? You try to think about it.
I think in rational choice theory, the institutions may change if my benefits change also.
So they
If
persist as long
my calculations changed, my institutions may be changed.
Yeah, so they actually persist over time as long as they serve this kind of utility, or they meet this utility maximization demand, or as long as they serve the utility seeking rational actors. Okay, so you keep them in place as long as they maximize your utility, right?
Yes.
Okay, but let me ask you a question. And you have like this kind of enforcement mechanisms, like these institutional rules, you reach this equilibrium, but still some people would defect, right?
Yes.
Like some sort of rebellious actions, some sort of troublemakers, whatever is. So how can I interpret, if you create these institutions, so people would abide by or would comply with these rules? Rational choice theory or rational choice institutionalist, would they have an answer to this? So back to the same example. but let me, like, it's not only for the midterm exam. So we set these this kind of rule in order to come up with this any kind of collective decision, like midterm exam, reaction paper 4, your term paper. So we have like this rule, this kind of creating subgroups and block votes in order to come up with this kind of collective decision on whatever issue comes up throughout the course. Okay, so this is not only for the midterm exam. So this is the rule, you know, we have throughout the semester. Why they persist? Why these rules actually would persist throughout the semester or throughout the year? So the answer from rational choice perspective would be
Because it serves to maximize the utility.
yeah, and they call it like this equilibrium, right? So it's self-enforcing, right? Because this is like the best reply, or the like the optimal, you know, point that would serve your interest or maximize your utility. So it should be self-enforcing equilibrium. You all, you know, you have to reproduce this over and over again in order to keep, you know, these rules in place. Because actually they serve its functionality as well. They serve, you know, your interest, or they maximize your utility. So you have like full control over, you know, its persistence over time. And they didn't actually, but the point of criticism here, they don't pay attention to what, like defection behavior, like not necessarily like enforcement mechanisms, you know, would work out all the time. Okay. And when it comes to the persistence or change over time, as long as it would maximize your utility, so it would continue or would persist. And if it stops, you know, to or it ceases to serve or to maximize your utility, so these institutions or these rules must change, right? So this is the main theoretical assumption, or the theoretical pillar here. But there is kind of criticism you can offer to this point, or to this account, to this theoretical account. Anyone? So the point here, as long as it maximizes your utility, so you keep this in place as like intentionally. This is like a purpose, like a deliberate action. Okay, and if it stops, you know, to serve your or to maximize your utility, and it's not like efficient anymore, so you have to change this and to establish new rules and new institutions. So what's the problem with this account?
دكتور I think ان ال preferences بتاعتنا او ال utility بتاعتنا بتكون differ from one person to another, so it may change يعني not persist.
Yeah, it's still the same issue about, you know, preferences.
Doctor, maybe some people's preferences are more important than others, so they were more recognized. So if someone has more influence, they might be more powerful in keeping the institution or changing it.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not clear how we place, you know, these kind of power struggles and power dynamics when it comes to changing or keeping institutions in place. Because like some inefficient institutions would persist because like most influential or most powerful people, like they have like the loudest, you know, voice, and they would stabilize, or they would keep, you know, they would perpetuate, you know, the same institutional rules. So that's why we need some sort of dynamic equilibrium, you know, how these kind of interactions and struggles between different individuals and different groups would like keep particular institutions or maintain, you know, particular institutions in place, and or would trigger some sort of institutional change. It changes over time. Another point regarding, you know, this account about persistence and change of institutions from rational choice institutionalist perspective. So forget about, you know, this kind of power dynamics and powerful interests. If particular institutions or rules stop being kind of efficient option, so you as individuals, you decide in order to create, you know, alternative institutional rules. So what's the critical issue here with this account? Try to guess. So if this kind of block vote and subgroups no longer serve the purpose, because some people no longer respond to your request, like representative of each group or like the head of the committee of the subgroup, people no longer are no longer responsive, you know, to the requests. So according to rational choice institutionalists, so you have to come up with a different alternative institutional rule in order to sort out, you know, the voting process amongst yourselves. So what's the problem here in reality?
How can we could consist on the new institution, all people يعني can consist on this.
Yeah, because it creates another collective action problem, right? So how would you solve, you know, this collective action problem? So in addition to you assign or you overestimate individual capacity, that you all have full control over the course of the events. So if these institutions are no longer efficient, so okay, let's have like another like institutional rules, and we have to have like kind of consensus to reach another equilibrium that would maximize our utility. But there are kind of unexpected, or you cannot control, you cannot have full control over the courses of the events. So perhaps like some people, so what kind of unintended consequences might arise from this situation that might escape or might be out of your hands or out of your control? Yeah, try to think about it. Do you see like the first step? Do you see that you can control like everything in order to relegate or to trash, you know, this option or this kind of institutional rule about block voting and subgroups, and to decide about different alternative institutional rule by calculating, by like you have the same like departure point here, the same starting point here. Strategically you make your own calculations that the cost of change, the cost is like the benefits from creating new institutions would outweigh the cost of a change. So you have your own calculations that these old rules are inefficient, so that's why we have to decide on another institutional rule in order to create another institutional norms or informal rules or formal rules in order to have, you know, this voting process done. Can you do this? Can you control the entire process?
No.
Okay, why?
Because maybe there are other variables I don't take into account other than the fact and then I'm rational. I mean, maybe there are other things that affect the institution or the or my decision that are not just rational.
With the same example, Salma, can you elaborate on this? I already said this in abstract terms, so I just want to make sure that you got you've got the message. So according to this account, it's kind of the persistence of particular institutions are self-enforcing equilibria. So these kind of rules serving your like utility maximizing option or choice. So that's why you keep these rules in place. So you decide not to change this because they are efficient, and each and every time I ask you to vote on a matter, so you just apply the same rule and then get back to me in like 3 or 4 days with your decision. But all of a sudden some people stopped replying to your request, as like Farida, Heidi, Yara, and Selma are like the representative or the chair of the 4 committees. Okay, and now people actually they make some troubles. They don't back to you in a timely manner. They don't respond to your voting requests. So maybe they are busy doing something else. So they don't pay attention to your calls for voting. So you decided to create different rules, to innovate different institutional rules or norms in order to stabilize or to reach like another equilibrium in order to get back to me with your decision regarding your final exam, to have it in class or take home exam. Okay?
Yes.
Is it that simple? It's like it's no longer efficient. So people like decided to come up with a different institutional alternative.
I think maybe here we're giving too much agency to the fact that we're going to change the institution. Maybe there are other things we need to change other than the institution. Are there other factors other than changing the institution?
Yeah, so people perhaps like this kind of institutional rule of block voting and subcommittees, this option is inefficient, but you keep it in place because there's kind of a second wave of COVID-19, so it's very difficult to have to start with like face-to-face or like in-class exam. So it doesn't matter. So you cannot control this. So that's why people actually refrain from voting. Okay, it doesn't matter. So they become kind of indifferent regarding the options. So as individuals, you cannot control. It's too much agency of. You give like too much agency or you overestimate the capacity of individuals to control everything, including the environment or the constraints they come from the environment. Okay.
Yes, doctor.
Yeah. So from sociological institutionalism with this kind of cultural calculations, so as I mentioned, it's very difficult. They are not clear about the origins of these institutions. As they mentioned, you find yourself in a world replete with pre-existing institutions and pre-existing symbols and beliefs and cognitive scripts and moral templates. So you find yourself like functioning or operating, in these kind of social system or the system of symbols and meaning and values and beliefs. But they didn't deny the fact that these institutions would change over time. So according to this logic, why institutions or these norms from cultural perspective, why institutions like rules and beliefs persist over time, and how they would change? It's quite the opposite. It's the other way around.
Doctor, I think it is the opposite, because in the case of culture, we can change the institution only if there is a consistency from all people to change it.
No, forget about rational choice. So here, from this perspective, okay, like not objecting or not opposing like a powerful man, for example, okay, or internalizing, you know, these kind of subordinate position to men in particular society. So they didn't deny the fact that change can occur, or the possibility of change over time. But why patriarchy as an institution persists over time, okay, and how this institution can change over time. So try to guess from what you studied, you know, from cultural theory.
I think culture is just more rigid when it comes to changing, so it changes more slowly.
Okay, so and they said that it's kind of an incremental manner.
Yes. So
Yeah.
it's so change is going to be harder to come in effect.
Yeah, and individuals cannot like control everything, so there is kind of no agency here. So they mentioned something about, you know, this kind of changing, you know, the environment signals. Okay, when these signals change, so people or you as like individuals or like in a collective manner, so you encode new routines, new values into your behavior, responding to or responding to this changing in the environment signals, or your interpretation of this changing in the environment signals. So it's kind of a change in the macro environment of action, so without kind of agents here. So this kind of interpretations change, so this would trigger, you know, change in these norms and beliefs and symbols in particular society. But they admitted the fact that it's kind of a messy and it's very hard to control with kind of unintended consequences. So you found that, you know what, I noticed or I
Doctor,
observed. Yeah,
for
yeah.
but our
Okay.
colleagues need your permission to get in.
Come on,
Yara,
Yara.
our colleagues need your
I
permission
don't
to
have
get in.
I don't have Yara here. So the okay.
لا. Not me. Our colleagues need the permission to get in, not
Okay,
me.
okay. But it's still, you know, it's already, you know, 1 hour and 10 minutes from the start of the lecture. But anyhow, so the already they admit the fact that it's kind of a messy and hard to control, and there is kind of a criticism you can offer to this account as well. So what kind of criticism you can offer here? So you notice that, you know what, I observed, you know, some sort of behavior that other students actually they started to vocalize, you know, their opposition. So there's kind of I interpreted, you know, these signals I received from the environment, and that's why I need to code this into my these kind of new routines into my behavior. So next time I might have like a different opinion, so I can freely criticize this and openly and transparently vocalize, you know, my opinion in public, no matter, you know, how old the professor is. So there is kind of criticism you can offer, you know, to this account. Any take on this? So it might, institutions can change slowly, incrementally, and in response to some sort of interpretation, different process of reinterpretations of the signals that coming from your surroundings or your environment.
Okay, I think that changing the institution is very bureaucratic process. I think it.
But here it's kind of informal rule. Okay, so it's not like you don't need to codify this or to write this into a PILO, internal, PILO in FAPS or in your in your institutions. So given the
maybe it
fact
will
that hierarchy,
change.
this kind of yeah, Salma?
I was going to say maybe it will change, but in a way I did not intend. So it would be maybe I wanted to make it easier for students to go and speak what's on their mind, but maybe I end up making them less likely to do so. Or maybe I'm just gonna make them more outspoken to the point that they don't really care about rules anymore.
Yeah, it's kind of unintended consequences, and it might not you might not get the results you initially aim to get, right?
Yes.
Okay, and if you conduct your field work in like particular institutions, if you find people like very kind of energetic, very kind of they are vocal, they are kind of they can freely criticize whomever they confront. How can you distinguish between you might assign this as, or you might come up with this conclusion that there's kind of informal rules or unwritten norms that would shape people's expectations and behavior in this institutions or in this organization, but how can you distinguish between this kind of informal rules in institutional rule and personal habits? Maybe it's kind of it has something to do with the traits of a particular, the personality traits of people. How can you distinguish between informal rules and personal habits? There is a solution to this, but you see the point. How can you demarcate the line between informal? How do you know that there is kind of informal or unwritten norms that would shape people's behavior, and this is not like related to their characters or personality traits? Doing or conducting, this kind of field works, you have to identify. This is what Hall actually mentioned, its standard operating procedure. So you have to identify, this is kind of a daunting task. So you have to distinguish between, to identify, all the written rules or unwritten rules in order to disentangle or in order to examine the effect of these informal rules on a particular behavior. So that's why you have to make a distinction between informality or informal rules and personal habits. And this is as a researcher, so you have to do this by identifying all the unwritten or the informal rules before you write up your or you finalize your research. And the same point made or the same criticism we made or the same point we made with regard to rational choice institutionalism. So here again, it's how can we situate, how can we place powerful interests and power struggles or power dynamics here? So not necessarily change cannot come necessarily or can actually result from this kind of different interpretation of human being. It's a kind of a process of contention as well. So perhaps like human rights organizations or feminist NGOs, they might have like different kind of activities or raising awareness activities that triggered, that they went through these kind of confrontations and these kind of processes of contention in order to change these patriarchal norms or values in a particular society that actually resonated or it has like kind of an echo in particular institutions. So it's not necessarily a process of interpretation or reinterpretation. So it's kind of struggle between different groups or like group, like social dynamics as well, and contentious dynamics as well, would account for or would bring about significant changes in like systems of like simple systems or cognitive scripts in particular setting or particular context. Okay.
Okay, doctor.
Okay, so next time we will talk more about historical institutionalism with kind of application in political science. It's kind of a mixture between agency choices and structural properties, and how this would account for a particular political outcome or like social and political outcome. So how did you find your third reaction paper? While writing this, it was like an easy task, or
It was very difficult for me.
yeah, okay. I need to get like more feedback.
Doctor, I feel like this paper had more, it like was fuller. It had so much more content to add and to just divulge into كده اللي هو it was a lot of work compared to the other ones, I mean.
Yeah, comparing to culturalism and rational choice. So structuralism, generally speaking, they are like as a school is full of details and different applications, and the criticism as well is not that straightforward. So that's why you might find this a little bit difficult comparing or relatively to rational choice and cultural approach or theory, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh.
Yeah, because historical institutionalism will take, like the same starting point, or like it borrowed, some sort of structural claims in order to come up with this new formulations or insights of historical institutionalism. So that's why I need to make sure that you digest it, but you understood, the assumptions or the main like theoretical pillars or foundation, and then different applications, and finally some sort of criticism of the macro historical analysis as like the most famous or the predominant approach in structuralism in comparative politics, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So regarding the second reaction paper, and by the way, I need to get, I didn't know like Salma Tajuddin and her group, and I really like your first and second reaction paper, and Sharif, I think Sharif group, and then Farida. So can I ask you guys next time to prepare like 5-minute presentation? Are you here? You're here, right? So I'm talking to you. Can you guys like prepare like 5-minute presentation next time, how you actually write your reaction paper, and to help your colleagues? It's kind of a best practice thing to help your colleague, write in a coherent way, and how you think about your reaction paper, and how you actually write down your ideas given your first or second reaction paper. But for Farida and Sharif, I think the second reaction paper was much better than the first one. And for Salma, and I think the second and the first, they are okay. So can you guys do that?
Yes, doctor, sure.
Sorry?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. And you can like select a representative, to do the representation, not necessarily, all the members, they have to talk. Okay, so it's like 5 minutes. So it's much better to get your message across, you know, how you actually synthesize the material, how you think about like structuring or organizing your reaction paper, and then how you write down in a concise, you write down your ideas, or the material you actually digested from the readings in a concise and a coherent way. Okay, so it's not regarding the content, but it's like, you know, the process of writing and structuring and organizing your reaction papers, because this would be helpful with your term paper as well. That will be like an individual task. Okay, so I'll have Heidi.
Yes, doctor, by next time, do you mean Wednesday or
Wednesday? Yeah.
during the lecture?
Yeah, I'll give like the last 15 minutes to you guys. 5
Okay, maybe I'll discuss with my group and see like which one is gonna present.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then Farida's here. I can't remember who else was in her group. I think Malak, and she's not here. Okay, Sharif.
Doctor,
Yeah.
I'm Marwa from Farida's group.
From Farida. Yeah. So can you coordinate or arrange, you know, to select a representative who would represent next time?
Okay, sure.
Okay, to present, you know, the main idea of your first or second reaction paper, your Farida's group, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so your second reaction paper, and then Sharif, I can't remember who else.
Doctor, I'm with the Sharif in the group.
Yeah, okay. So can you guys like coordinate and arrange who will represent the group next time for the presentation?
Yes, sure.
Okay, your second reaction paper, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so see you next time. And this week it's a promise, we're gonna finish, you know, this theoretical part. It was like a very intensive part, so we are almost there, and you made it there, guys, so you have to be proud of yourselves. So you will have the grades of the third reaction paper as well by Thursday. And next week we're not going to have any lectures, so you have some time to study for your midterms. And let me talk more about your midterm exam next time, inshallah. Okay?
دكتور حلا وائل كانت في اللكتشر بس عندها problem with the connection فطلعت، فعايزة حضرتك بس يعني تشوفيها في الاتندنس.
Yeah, okay.
حوالي تلت ساعة كده ومش عارفة تدخل تاني.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So that's all for today. And yeah?
About the presentation, we're just going to explain how we go about doing it, صح? مش like that, not the actual paper.
No, not the actual content, not the substance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? Yeah. See you next time, guys. Bye.